Hey, Mug World Entertainment, and of course, episode 6 of season 4 of Strange New Worlds is here. I have to say, it's impressive how, after basically 10 years, they've managed to continue to put slop after slop after slop out. And this episode, this isn't two images just put together. This is the way the episode goes a lot of the time. So this episode is the disaster movie homage. And it really does kind of play into like the Poseidon Adventures and stuff like that. They also do take a trope from, well, not a trope, a rip-off basically off an episode of TNG. Do you remember the episode where the Enterprise D obviously ends up in a scenario where the crew all gets separated and stuck in sections? So you had Troy stuck on the bridge with O'Brien and Rowlaren. Worf was stuck in 10 Ford with Keiko while she's very heavily pregnant. Picard is in the turbo lift with the three or four, I think it's 3 kids. The way they were stuck in each section, that's kind of what they do here as well. So what it is, and it makes no sense, is the Enterprise is traveling at warp. There's a clock running down in this episode, the onboard ship clock, because they're all about to clock off basically for the weekend. And it's funny because you see people all so excited all the bloody time, and yet they're all kind of like bored and I can't wait to finish my shift and all this type of crap. Scotty is about to leave engineering. Oh, sick bay was sticking in my head there because half of this episode is in sick bay. But he's looking at the engines and he's saying something about the brassard collectors and all this type of stuff, and the other guy's like, hey look dude, you may as well clock off, this is just a simple thing, I can do this. And Scotty's like, yeah, if there's any weirdness with anything else, you know, because something pops up and he's like, yeah, it's a bit strange, but it's like something simple. He's like, you know, if any other issues arise, just let me know. And the guy's like, yeah, okay. So Scotty goes off, he gets into the turbo lift, and as he's on his way, the guy contacts him and says, hey, that thing, it's just got weirder. It's about to form something else, and there's a wormhole. Now, the Enterprise doesn't form the wormhole, yet it's kind of indicated that it's forming the wormhole, but then we're told later that it didn't form the wormhole. Weird. But Scotty, now this is funny as well. Scotty tells the guy, immediate stop. Shut down the warp engines, because they're at warp anyway. And the guy goes, without authorization from the bridge. And the guy's like, by the time we ask blah 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 and all this, it'll be too... And you're thinking, the amount of time you took to explain that, you could have contacted the bridge and say, we need an emergency stop. But whatever. The guy does turn off warp speed. And yet then we go to the bridge and Ortega goes, hey Captain, we're picking up a thing and there's a thing and there's a thing and oh, we're screwed now, we're getting sucked into it. And then we see the Enterprise getting pulled into this slipstream wormhole at warp. How are they at warp when the engineer dude literally just stopped warp? Like, the time between the guy putting in an emergency stop from warp to Ortiz saying, hey, there's a thing here, and the ship then getting sucked into the wormhole, made no sense, because it was like, but you shouldn't have been at warp at this stage. But I digressed. They still were at warp. They get sucked into this thing. And this is where you kind of find out like parts of the Poseidon type of adventure and stuff. Because what happens in the Poseidon adventure? Well, of course, the ship gets turned upside down and people are all fucked all over the place and you can't stand up straight. Same thing happens here. Even though the ship is spinning half the time and stuff, then it's like this. It's at this angle. And the inertia dampeners aren't working all of a sudden, so they're all kind of standing at an angle like that. And then they manage to use the last bit of power to, which constantly happens, by the way. They keep telling us we've no power, but they always seem to have power. Because Ortega says, by the way, this happens before that. Everything gets electrified when they get sucked into the thing. He gets knocked out by hitting on the shields. Their last kind of hurrah for shield. So Pike gets zapped. Ortega then is left in charge. Because they were about to hand over, by the way, command and stuff to like the junior officers while they finally clock off. But half the bridge get knocked out except like Uhura and Ortiz. I think it's Ortiz or Ortega. Her anyway. So she kind of comes in command, but she uses, and she specifically says, I've used the last remaining bit of power we have available to reinitiate or realign the inertial dampers, so the ship can level out. And yet then constantly we hear about, we've used the last bit of power for this. We've used the last bit of power for this. It's like, you literally told us he has used the last bit of power to align the ship. Baldy over here. That's Dr. Boyce. You know who Dr. Boyce is, people? That's right. That was the original Doctor on board the Enterprise in The Cage, the pilot episode. He's brought on board. Why? Well, Umbega here is thinking of leaving. And as you can see, during the whole issue, I'll actually keep that picture there for a second. When the ship was sucked in, this medical table slid down, and this is where they do one of these standard tropes. He pushes Christina out of the way, and he gets pinned against the wall, and he's basically cut in half. Now, he's not cut in half, but his whole midsection is crushed. But it somehow managed to avoid his vital organs and stuff like that. So, they have to come up. Well, he wants to just, he's like, you're just, you know, she won't tell him what the issue is to start with, but, and Dr. Boyce, by the way, Dr. Boyce apparently has a reputation for being a prick, that he's incredibly hard to work with and stuff like this. So, she contacts, you want to say 10 forward, but it's not 10 forward, especially when we see where they seem to be on the ship. Basically, the bar. It's not even a mess hall, it's a bar. Boyce is stuck down there with Spock, La'an, and Number 1. And she contacts him and says, like, sends him the information about Umbega. And he's like, asking, like, oh good, you finally got through. Can you get down here? We need medical down here. Now, this is after, a good swing back to what it's after, and she says, no, like, I have one injured here, and it's Umbega, and she sends something, and he sees, and he's instantly like, yeah, there's no helping him. And he's like, yeah, get down here, you know, there's no helping him, he's gone, so leave him, get down here, and need your help. And she's very much like, no. And then she kind of does her comms are breaking up. The thing that he needs to help with is, while they were in their mess hall bar area, gravity, the artificial gravity start increasing. So they had to move to one section of the bar closer to the door, and Spock says there's a control panel. Conveniently, there's a control panel that can re-establish normal gravity, but it's over in the worst part. So Number 1, Una decides, I'll go over and do it. And as she goes over, you know, she's struggling with the gravity pushing down, and it breaks her leg. Not just does it break her leg, but they show us how much it breaks her leg, because we get to watch her whole leg bone come ripping out of her leg. Yeah. So, that happens. And then they're all kind of stuck in areas. They're trying to figure out crap. And Beg, if you remember from season 1, all the way back in like 2019 or something, his daughter, who was dying of a disease, he was coming up with a plan about like particles or some shit, that these theoretical particles you could use to heal someone. That's basically how they end up fixing everything. They need to get a lot of it on the ship because it can both fuel the ship and at the same time save lives. And they have to come up with ideas. Now they're trying to come up with ideas with how to get to, you know, get sensor data for what's happening. Now Scotty was stuck in the turbo lift. He gets out of the turbo lift. The Vulcan bitch helps him out, who turns out is a vegetarian. Now we know Vulcans don't eat meat, but they wouldn't class themselves as vegetarians. But she does. He says something, if we hit the threshold of this slipstream, we'll be pulled apart. We're basically mincemeat. And she says, as a vegetarian, I find that statement quite offensive or illogical or some shit. And it's like, what the all this type of crap happens. They come up with a plan, launch a probe. The probe instantly gets destroyed, but it does give them data. And then they come up with the plan for all the blah blah blah, the particle shit and stuff. But they need to get another reading. And their sensors are down, so they need to activate the sensors. However, to do so, you have to walk the hull of the ship. Spock decides he'll be the one to do it. So, even in a warp bubble, apparently, once you're in your spacesuit, you can walk on the hull of the ship. Pretty sure you can't, but either way, he's out there with these little gravity sticky cup things. He has no communication with anyone inside the ship. Your communication seems to be lost. He does get to the pod thing. They see the sensors have reactivated, but it's overloading and they have to jettison it. They give it it has a countdown, Pike waits, and they're trying to tell Spock you need to get out there, and he has to jettison it anyway, and there's no reading from Spock, so they're like, is he dead or alive? La'an's decides she'll go out and find him to see, so she gets out there and does find him. He's still in the pod hatch thing. Now this is where it was confusing to me. Where the hell are they on the ship? Because when Spock comes out, he's on what looks like a flat part of the ship, so I'm like, is he on the saucer? But he seems to be at the very back. I was like, okay. But then there's a side shot and he's right in line with one of the nacelles, which made me ask, is he on the other nacelle? Because how the hell did he get there? By the way, while all this is happening, that clock is still counting down. They have 20 hours or 20 minutes, I think it was hours, before they reach the threshold of the wormhole, which will disintegrate them. So each time that it's running down, at this stage we're at 12 minutes. When Spock goes out, we're at 8 minutes. And it's like, where is he on the ship? And then when it does the side shot of him going along the hull, you can clearly see the other nacelle. This part looked curved, so I was like, is he on the other nacelle? And if that's the case, how the hell did he get there? But then when it comes to the other shot, it's very flat. And then it goes to a forward shot, and you can't make heads or tail what's ahead of you. I couldn't spot the bridge or anything. I was like, where in the hell on the hull of this ship is he? I don't even think they know. Because he can't be on the saucer when he's perfectly in line with the other nacelle. Is he down on the secondary hull? But if that's the case, when they were showing you the forward shot, you should have seen the neck of the ship and the saucer. And you didn't. Weird. So, they do get the readings. By the way, while all this is happening, Scotty keeps asking, what would Pella do? Which is the Scrooged woman. That's her character's name, Pella. He gets transported into a Jeffries tube, which, once again, that was the last part of her power. The other way they conserved power was to get everybody into quarters or any room and knock off all life support in corridors. The door of sickbay doesn't quite close fully, so for some reason they keep showing you frost. Like, you keep seeing fog of frost starting when life support has been shut down. I don't know why that would be the case, but they do. And they stop it from coming into sickbay by putting blankets against the door. Christine Chapel wraps herself in blankets, and Umbega is just stuck there shivering. Until he's not. And then he is again. It's weird. But I'm kind of jumping around it because it's all over the place. It really is. So Scotty's freaking out in the Jeffries room. He's talking to Pella, who is talking about how the ship, you have to listen to it. She basically gives him the speech for how he becomes a miracle worker. She literally says you have to do this and this and this. Otherwise, how would you ever be recognized as a miracle worker? It's like, good God. So, by the way, we find out that Chapel this whole time has not actually been full-time on the Enterprise. That she's literally a resident nurse on the Enterprise. And she's, like, angry at him. Before the whole incident happens with going into the slipstream and Bega getting fucked up, they're having an argument because she's like, well, if you leave, I have to leave, and stuff like this. And he's like, well, why haven't you ever, put in for full position? And they're arguing. He's like, this is your problem. Every time thing gets real, you run away. And she's like, I could say things about you. And then, of course, the shit happens. Pella, when she's talking to Scotty about, you have to listen to the ship and understand the ship, she was actually listening herself because she could hear something. And it turns out there was a micro hole in her wall sucking the air out of her quarters. Do you know how she repairs it? I shit ye not. This is what she actually does. She goes over to a drawer, opens it, and pulls out a bicycle puncture repair kit. And takes out one of the plasters and sticks it on the wall. Star Trek, people. Star Trek. So while they have now the stuff, Chapel's idea is open the doors to sickbay, freeze Umbega, remove the table, put him down, and be able to repair him using these particle things. The particle things they do get, it's on a disc. However, there's a problem with the disc. Spock is now radiated to be Jesus. So is Na'an, but nowhere near as bad as he is. Why? Don't know. They were pretty much out there for the same time. By the way, there's a mistake they make because while she's walking on the hull, or pulling herself with, she also has the sucky pads to go into the little hatch where the pod was, the sensor pod. She lets go of her things and crawls and then pulls herself in. It's like, that's a massive mistake. Like, a massive mistake. Because you've just shown that she let go of the suction pad things. She should have just instantly been mincemeat. Gone. No. Either way, the data chip is buggered. So why she even brought it with her, I don't know. But she hands it to Una, and Una's like, wow, like, can we even salvage anything on this? And she's like, yeah, if we had 7 hours. At this stage, they have like, I think it was like 3 minutes. Umbega just keeps saying like, yeah, you gotta let me die, you gotta let me go, blah blah blah. You're just, you're postponing the inevitable. If you pull the desk away, which he tried to push away, I instantly die. But if you keep me here and you keep doing what you're doing, you're just giving me minutes and all this shit. This was earlier, blah blah blah. But now she has her plan, all the rest. How do they get the data download? Well, they can't use the chip because they don't have 7 hours. They do something else. And once again, they make a massive fuck up when they're doing it. Because what they do, I'll get to it, is... It's here somewhere. Where are you? There you are, you little beast. A mind meld. So all the information is in Spock's head. Can put it into La'an. She can tell them what to do. Have you spotted the massive problem with this? He still has the glove on. It needs to be skin on skin contact. Yeah. But he has the glove on and it works. So the information gets there. Scotty relays the message, says, hey, these neutrino things, they're real. There's 30 seconds left. The question is asked, if we fly the Enterprise, which, by the way, they've no power, remember this. They've no control of the ship. But they have power to turn the ship into these neutrinos or whatever they were. How? This is what I mean. How they kept saying we've used the very last bit of power for this thing. But then they're using the last bit of power for this thing. And this thing. And that thing. And oh look, now we can just turn the ship. It's like, okay. But she's like, hey, it's going to take far too long. We don't have that time. We've literally 30 seconds before we hit the threshold and we're ripped apart. And they've conceded like, well, we're fucked. At this stage, Chapel has opened the door, frozen Mbega, and she's pushing the desk away from him, and she's about to start the healing process, and as she pulls her hand off the desk, her finger snaps off. Reasons, I suppose. But Scotty puts his hand on the hull of the ship, and Pella told him, like, you have to trust in the ship. Every ship has a glitch. Because he's complaining now about the ship, like he's terrified. He's like, you know, the Enterprise is meant to protect us from the darkness of space and shit, and now it's the thing condemning us to it. And she's like, it's got, you have to have faith. Every ship has a glitch and stuff. And he puts his hand on the wall, and he's like, she can handle it. She'll hold. Fly us into it. And they do, and they manage to get all the power, and they get out, and Chapel instantly starts healing and Mbega, but does he make it? And they get out of the bubble, and everything's a-okay. Chapel wakes up in sick bay on a bed. She's been looked after. Pike comes in, and Mbega's on the bed across from her. He's fine. He was telling her a joke, by the way. She asked him to tell him a joke as she freezes him, and when he comes through, he's like, you never let me finish my joke. And she's like, you were taking forever and stuff like this. And apparently he's fine. Whether he's going to be still around or not, because Boyce is now on the ship. Which also makes no sense, because now they've introduced Boyce, but then they're going to end the entire series on season 5 with McCoy showing up. Which makes no sense, because McCoy wasn't even in the very first episode with Kirk, but because he wasn't on the ship. But they, Chapel puts in for, like, a full position on the Enterprise, all this crap. Scotty and Pella have a reunion. They're like, oh, thank God, we're great, blah, 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 all this bullshit. And there's one other thing they decided to rip off in this episode, which I left to the end. I wanted to get through the episode. There used to be this comedy series in Scotland with these Scottish lads. And they used to do skits. And one of the skits, you may, for everyone this side of the world, like in Ireland and England and Scotland stuff, we would know this skit very well. America, Canada, places like that, you guys mightn't. But look it up, because it's fucking hilarious. It's two Scottish lads in an elevator. A lift. And the lift is now voice activated. And the guy goes, 11. And the voice activation can't understand the accent. And he's 11. And he's trying to put on the American accent and everything, and the elevator still doesn't understand. They do that in this with Scotty. Scotty's in the thing after the ship goes into shit. he grabs the thing. By the way, they keep fucking up with the control pads in the turbo lifts that you have to hold, number one, and tell the computer destination, like engineering, bridge, wherever. They always walk into those and just say bridge and off they go. But now he's turning to... But he's sitting there and he goes, engineering. And it doesn't work. He goes, don't tell me it's my accenting. And he starts going, engineering and stuff. It's like, oh my god, you ripped off the Scottish skit. Oh my god, how bad. So that is the episode. It's basically a disaster movie in space. It's a rip-off of the Poseidon Adventure where everything's turned upside down and people are stuck in sections and stuff like that. Also, they kind of rip off a bit of that TNG episode. Can't remember what that episode's called. I think it's in season 5, maybe 6. But it's the one where they've lost communication. They're all stuck in different sections and stuff like that. Worf delivers. What's O'Brien's kid's name again? Molly O'Brien. The first child. They did have a second child in DS9. But overall, it was just another garbage episode. I hated this split screen shit. And they were doing it like where they're putting in a third person and stuff as well. I hate that. It was stupidly done with no, again, science explanation for things. And the fact that they were able to walk out in the hole and all this shit. Yeah, it was ridiculous. So, that is episode 6. There is only... I was going to say 2. There's not. There's 4 episodes left. Oh, God. So, yet another gimmick episode. 6 episodes in, and 6 gimmick episodes. Yay. So, with that, I shall leave it there for this one. So, do like and share and subscribe and hit that hype button and all of that good stuff. Cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.